Underneath most people's struggle with addiction is a self-esteem problem. I'm saying that most people who battle with addiction have self-esteem issues. They derive their sense of worth from the wrong sources. And unless this is dealt with, they will continue to go back to addiction as a means of coping with their struggle with their value, their sense of worth. This is so critical if we are going to deal with and overcome addiction. Then we must pay very close attention to our sense of worth, what makes us value ourselves. That is, if we even have any very high value for ourselves. Now, several years ago, a young pastor friend set out to get married. And to the chagrin of everyone, he picked a lady who everyone within a certain group knew to be a call girl, a kind of a prostitute. Incidentally, she even already had one or two offsprings from prostitution. His friends and family protested to no avail, to the extent that almost no one in his family attended the wedding. But he insisted. It is interesting to note that while everyone saw a call girl, he saw a great girl. While everyone saw a trash, he saw beauty. He decided he was going to do anything for her, and he was going to spend his life with her. As a matter of fact, because people thought that she did not deserve the attention she was getting and they could do nothing to stop it, there is a sense in which they thought you would think that he was charmed by her. Do you know, by any chance, that is how grace functions? It functions like charm, some sort of a spell that is cast on the person who is offering, who is giving the grace. Welcome to the Behavior Mastery Challenge. This is model number 5. And in model number 5, our focus is on understanding your worth. The reasons are because an understanding of your true worth, a proper estimation of your value, your worth, will change the narrative when it comes to what you allow in your life, what you allow happen, what you allow to enslave you. When you rate yourself very high, there are certain things that you are not going to allow when it comes to addictions, slavery, things that stifle your sense of purpose and direction. So we're going to look at some of the key ingredients if you are going to win any battle in life. And one of those ingredients, or some of those ingredients, are self-estimation and self-value. We're going to look at self-love and self-confidence. So the question right now is, where do you derive your value, your sense of worth? Where do you derive it from? This is going to be critical in this journey to victory. Most of the times, there are two basic areas from where people derive their sense of worth. And so as I go through them, you're going to think, you're going to meditate, and then ask yourself, where am I getting my sense of worth from? What defines how I rate myself? Now, two basic areas people rate themselves from. Some people derive their value from without, That is, the things that define their rating of themselves comes from outside of them. For other people, it comes from within them. So let's look at these two areas. So when you derive your worth, your value from people and what they say about you, what they think about you, when you derive your worth from the places you are associated or you have an affinity with, what they say, what they think about you, when you derive your worth from the things you have, it could be cars, it could be property, it could be material wealth, it could be anything so far as there are things. When you derive your worth from either people, places, or things, it is a terrible place to be. It's a terrible place to be because now it puts the control in the hands of people. It puts the control in the hands of places and things. It means that people can decide to control how you feel. People and their opinions can take over your confidence, your how you love yourself, how you see yourself, your emotions, the way you feel is now left in the control of people. No, that's terrible. You don't want to do that. Because what that does is that now you're always looking for validation. You're always looking for acceptance. You're always trying to belong to a people, a group, a fraternity. You're always you want to work hard to deserve. So you're looking for validation. You're working so hard to merit, to qualify for greatness. And in your attempt to do all this, you can do almost anything. You can become depressed. You can become frustrated. You can, of course, it leads to an incredible lot of negative emotions, which bring negative energy. And now before you know it, you want to deal with those negative emotions and negative energy. And so you're going to need drugs. You're going to need all kinds of vices. You're going to need to, sometimes you want to feel belonging to a class, a circle, a group of people, and now you want to smoke so that you can be accepted. You belong to a certain social class or whatever, and because they drink, and you don't want to feel odd among them, you want to feel accepted among them, now you got to drink. And now you're drinking until now you're addicted to drinking. You're smoking, you're addicted to smoking. You have a very poor attitude to your sexual health. You sleep around with just anybody, anything, because all of you have gone out and everybody is sleeping with somebody. Now you got to sleep with somebody. That is because you derive your worth from the wrong places. And this is a terrible place to be. This is the reason why some of us have found ourselves battling with some of the lifestyles that we are battling with. But you don't have to do that. Some time ago, somebody asked me a very profound question. He said, what can I do to receive or enjoy the grace of God? And my response to him alarmed him, because I said to him that there's nothing to do to receive the grace of God. There is nothing to do to enjoy the grace of God. Because the truth is that if you do anything, I told him, then what you get is not grace. You are receiving a payment, a salary, you're earning. And salary is earned. Grace is not earned. Anything in life that makes you want to earn your worth will be less than God's estimation for what you are. Now, there are two words that are translated in the Bible as grace. In the Old Testament, the word grace is derived from the word chen, C-H-E-N, chen. It's from the Old Testament Hebrew word. But in the New Testament, the Greek word that is translated grace is called charis, C-H-A-R-I-S. Both of them mean the same thing. Both of them means one, favor, two, charm. That's what they mean. Now, every one of us know about grace, or most of us know about grace as favor, which we call it unmerited favor. But not many of us know grace as charm. But you see, that's what grace is, which is why, in relation to the story I shared, the man of God, young as he was, found this lady, and what he could see in that lady, nobody could see it. You could almost think he has been charmed. Charms are magical. They are intended to subdue, to control. They are intended to summon, maybe by incantation or by supernatural force. The Bible always says that, someone found grace in the eyes of God. And I keep asking myself, why is grace always associated with the eyes? The way somebody sees a thing, the way somebody looks at a thing, the way somebody estimates a thing, somebody's personal interpretation of value about a thing. Why? If you look at Genesis chapter 6 verse 8, the Bible says, but Noah found grace in the eyes of God. Why is grace always associated with the eyes? This is so important. The reason is because just like beauty is said to be in the eyes of the beholder, favor is always also in the eyes. Grace is also in the eyes of the beholder. So grace functions like charm. It's about the way a particular person values a thing. It's like a sort of spell that is cast on an individual. And so it is the reason why when you look at grace, grace is usually given to people who, in every other person's estimation, these people are not worthy of what they are getting. When you look at them, they don't deserve it. They don't merit it. They don't even have the capacity, the competence to earn it. But then that interpretation, that evaluation of whether they are worthy, whether they deserve it, whether they merit it, whether they qualify to earn it, it's somebody's opinion. But for the person conferring the grace on them, he has a different opinion, a different estimation. There are other things he is looking at that he is able to see about that person that other people cannot see. And other people cannot force their evaluation or valuation on him. He has his own valuation. And for crying out loud, when it comes to the grace of God upon that defines our rating, the grace of God that defines how we are valued, it is in the eyes of the beholder. There is a way God is seeing you that nobody else is seeing. As a matter of fact, there is a way God is even seeing you that even you yourself, you are not able to see. Because what you are using to rate yourself, what you are using to evaluate yourself is not what God is using. It is the reason why in Romans chapter 11 verse 6, the Bible says that if it is by grace, then it is no more of works. If it is by grace, it has nothing to do with your works, what you do or what you don't do. And I read it in Romans chapter 11 verse 6, says, and if by grace, then it is no more of works. Otherwise, grace is no more grace. But if it be of works, then it is no more of grace. Otherwise, work is no more work. The Bible is saying that God's rating, God's valuation of you is not defined by what you do, is not defined by what you do not do. It's defined by who you are. He created you. He knows what he got stacked in there. He knows your worth. He knows your rating. He knows your valuation. You have no idea what your value is. And I know the value of a thing by how much somebody is willing to pay to redeem, to restore, to recover that thing. It is the reason why if you're walking with God, you don't try to earn the grace of God. You don't try to deserve it. You don't bother to try to merit it or try to be worthy of grace. No, you just receive it. Because the reason you've got it is because God actually is crazy about you. God is in love with you like crazy. Nobody else understands why God values you that much. I just thought to share these thoughts with you to see if I can bring you to the place where I can change your mind about how you rate yourself. I can change your mind about how you see yourself, your sense of worth, because I have to be able to bring you to that place where your worth, your value for yourself changes, because once you see yourself in a different light, there are certain things you're just not going to let happen again. So like I said, a lot of people derive their worth from people, places, and things without them. But there's a set of people, other people who derive their worth from within them. From within them. From their source, from their manufacturer, from their creator that defines who they are, the components that he has used in making them, their shape, who they are, is what defines their worth, not what a person thinks, not about people, places, or things, but about who they are. And who you are is defined by the ingredients that was factored in your creation. First of all, who created you defines your worth, not people. People are creations like you. Places are the creations of people. Things are oftentimes the creation of people. You cannot devalue yourself to the point where you rate yourself based on what people think. You must rate yourself based on what God is saying about you. And in talking about your source, for crying out loud, you want to ask yourself, what is God's valuation of you? There are 5 elements that define your worth. Number 1, I call them your shape. Number 1, your spiritual gifts. That's for the letter X, S. Define your worth, the kind of gifts God has given you. Number 2, your heartbeat, what you love. There is something about your heartbeat that I'm told is completely different from any other person's heartbeat, just like your fingerprints are different from any other person's fingerprints. Your heartbeat, what you love. The next thing that defines your worth is your abilities. You have unique abilities that are different from every other person's abilities. The next is your personality. You have a unique personality that makes you stand out. The next are your experiences. Whether those experiences are memorable, whether they are painful, whether they are positive in your own estimation, whether they are negative in your estimation, your experiences are peculiar. They are unique to you. Every negative experience you have is an indication of what God has supernatural. Every negative experience you have survived is an indication of what God has supernaturally enabled you to conquer and has given you that capacity to become a solution to that problem for every other person in the human race. This is how valuable you are. So if you survived rape, if you survived suicide, if you survived whatever, you have survived. It's a clue to a problem you have been wired to solve. That's how valuable you are. Can I suggest that you let God define your worth? Don't let people, don't let places, don't let things. As soon as you let God define your worth, it will completely change how you see yourself, and then change what you allow, what you permit, and what you don't allow, what you don't permit. So the question is, how does God define your worth? One of the first ways God defines your worth is that He describes you as the apple of His own eyes. Wow. That is, the importance God attaches to His own eyes is the value He places on you. Think, imagine how valuable your eyes are to you and what length you can go to preserve, to protect your eyes. Your eyes are so important that even when something is coming to the eyes, it will close by itself. That's a defense mechanism. And God says His value for you is equivalent to the apple of His eyes. The next thing that describes the way God values you is by how much He paid. He was willing to pay to get you, to recover you, to redeem you. Of course, you know that if you measure your value by what God paid His only begotten Son to rescue you, then you will understand how incredibly valuable you are. Therefore, value yourself. Don't treat yourself like trash. Don't mess with any part of your body. Don't subject yourself to slavery or to addiction. God values you. It is to this end that it becomes important that together in this model, we use the thoughts that I have shared to redefine what the grace of God is all about. Because in my own personal research, I've come to the conclusion that grace is a profound privilege given to us by God, to the extent that you need to come to the realization that even though grace is usually given to people who are not worthy to receive the grace by human estimation, when that grace gets to them, it doesn't leave them unworthy. It doesn't leave them undeserving. It doesn't leave them the way it met them. No, 1,000 times no. It doesn't leave them the way it met them. Instead, it makes them to now become worthy. It makes them to now become qualified. It is the reason why when God gives grace, He is not economical with grace. When God gives grace, He always uses words like this to describe His grace. If He is not calling it great grace, He is calling it abundant grace, or He is calling it manifold grace. The reason is because when God empowers you with grace, when God downloads, releases His grace upon anybody, it comes in overwhelming proportion to bring your weakness, what you lack, what you miss, what you are deficient of, you now have an overflow of the same. Is the reason why when you look at scriptures like Acts of the Apostles chapter 4:33, it says, and with great power gave the apostles witness of the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ, and great grace was upon them all. Great grace will always result in great power, great enabling. When grace comes on you, it gives you capacity. whatever you are deficient of, you are empowered in that area. Grace does not leave you the way it is. So grace is so free. You don't need to do anything to earn grace. But when you now receive grace, you are empowered in the areas of your limitations. I like the way Romans chapter 5 verse 17 puts it. It says, for if by one man's offense death reigned by one, much more they which receive abundance of grace. God is not economical with grace. He cannot stand gracing you and you are still powerless, gracing you and you are still helpless, gracing you and you are still a mincemeat for addiction. No, it messes with the grace of God. It makes a mess of the power of that grace. So he says, for if by one man's death reigned by one, much more they which receive abundance of grace and the gift of righteousness shall reign in life by one, Jesus Christ. The import of that scripture is that through Adam's offense, Adam's offense was so powerful that it made death reign to every human mortal, every human being on the face of the earth. He says, if the effect of Adam's sin was that powerful, he says much more than the effect of Adam's sin, the death of Christ, the righteousness of Christ will bring a greater effect. How? By the abundance of grace. As you receive the abundance of grace, it is always accompanied by the gift of righteousness, and it gives you the capacity to reign in life, not to be dominated by addiction, to reign. Grace empowers you to reign, to rule over your addictions. I like the way 1 Peter 4 verse 10 puts it. It says that as every man has received the gift, even so minister the same one to another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. God never gives grace without an overflow. Why? The reason God is always overdosed, always lavished with grace, is so that there is no excuse for grace or the receiver of grace not to fulfill that desired end, that desired objective, that desired expectation and aspiration of God for giving grace. You are given so much grace that it is impossible. It is an aberration that grace will not be able to empower you to become and to do what naturally you could not do. It is the reason why when you receive that grace and you still cannot do, it's a mismatch. It's either that you didn't receive the grace or you don't even understand what you received. This is so important. Is it not amazing that he did not only give great grace, but he accompanied it with the gift of righteousness? The gift of grace is always accompanied by the gift of righteousness. Therefore, when you receive grace and now receive the gift of righteousness, it gives you the capacity for righteousness, the capacity for right living. This is so important. That first of all, righteousness is given to you as a gift, not as works, not about what you do. But when grace and the gift of righteousness comes on you, the ability to now do right, the capacity is delivered. So, great grace brings supernatural power to do what is naturally impossible. Great grace brings supernatural ability to do the supernatural. That's what grace is about. As soon as grace does not result in that, it is what Paul writing said, you took the grace of God in vain. You cannot carry lavish, great, lavish and great ability and still be dominated and enslaved. I repeat, you cannot carry lavish grace and ability and still be dominated and enslaved. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. His strength becomes perfected in our weakness because that strength replaces the weakness and our weakness switches a substitution. This, if you ask me, is so important that we understand the import of the grace of God so that we can now engage that grace and dislodge our weaknesses, our addictions, our frustrations, and the things that we struggle with. I dare you today to receive the grace of God. Don't try to earn it. Don't try to be worthy for. Just receive it. Receive it. Believe it that you receive the grace of God and that you have received the capacity to express right living. The question now is, how exactly does grace swallow up our weaknesses? That is going to be our conversation for model number 6. And so pay attention to the exercises for the day, fill them up, click the submit button, and then get ready for our one-on-one session tonight. This is getting more interesting. I'll see you in model 6.